and introductions and things like that, because we've got the cabinet secretary coming along in a minute, and I just want to get some of the things out the way first, if that's okay. So bear with me, just while I click on some things that won't take a second. Actually, can you just tell me if I'm right way around?
Yes, David, it's perfect. You're on the second slide at the minute.
Okay, 2 seconds. It did. So I was a little bit on the first morning, getting everything working. Are we on the right way around? Have we got display?
No, the other way around.
That's it.
Yes, perfect.
Right. So welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming to our Net Zero Week. As it says there, it's to learn about the latest innovations, engagement, policy, and hear from expert speakers about the future of housing in Wales. This is more than about net zero. This is about future housing and the type of homes we want to live in and things. Our hosts this week, you're going to see a lot of myself and Akshita. Some of you probably, if you come to a net zero events or anything, you'll know both of us here. But we'll be your hosts over the week. We'll take it in turns, so you won't have to listen to me all the time. Akshita will be running this afternoon, and we've divided them up over the week. I also want to say this is in collaboration with Sero, and I want to say a big thank you for sponsoring this event. If you're not familiar with them, if you're technical, I think their website says they're a comprehensive energy as a service solution that integrates private finance, grant funding, and existing budgets. But what I do like on the front of their website is how they best describe themselves, I think, and it's easy to digest, is they're here to help social housing sector move faster into creating greener, healthier, and more affordable homes. And that's what we want, isn't it? Greener, healthier, and affordable homes. So James will be speaking in a second, and I will introduce him. Very grateful to Sarah. It makes this thing viable and possible. So thank you. If you haven't used this type of platform before, there's a Q&A button down the bottom. Please use the Q&A. We'll answer questions. The speakers will answer questions as we go along. There is a chat as well, but the Q&A is where we can see we tend to lose things in the chat, whereas the Q&A is easier to manage and make sure. There'll be slides available afterwards. There'll be a recording of this. If you've got colleagues who missed it and you want to show them it. Last year, I think we had more views afterwards than we did at the week because there's people share it with colleagues, with tenant groups and things like that. And there's also these theme Padlets. If you're not familiar with them, these are new this year. We've started putting together resources. So I think the one on the left, yep, is WHQS to tenant engagement. So examples of leaflets, videos, brochures, magazine articles, anything to do with tenant engagement, WHQS2. And I think on the one on the right is one that actually is building, which is net zero type resources, tenant explainers, tenant self-help videos, other people's explanation of what is a heat pump in 1 minute and things. Stuff to influence. We'll call it influence. Borrow, probably is a more blunter word for it. But we're collecting stuff from across other nations and putting them together on these Padlets. There's also one on just tenant engagement basics, things like constitutions and code of conducts and things like that. So do have a look out for these. They're all on our website, and I think they're really useful for sharing. And this is what we want. We want to solve, whether it's tenant engagement, net zero, whether it's WHQS2. We want to share these things together, sharing resources, getting influenced by each other's materials. So do look out for them. We also want to mention there's a session coming up as well soon on sensors and trying to demystify sensors. There's been some resistance in this sector from tenants, misinformation, things like that. And so we're going to be doing a session really looking at what are sensors and why they're essential and why they benefit tenants themselves. And as I say, we've got a best practice event coming up soon, some lovely speakers over the day looking at the tenant engagement, what it looks like going forward. The world's changing a lot. Social media is changing. People's societies are. We want to inspire with some new ways of tenant engagement. And next week, if you're probably more of interest to the GOGs here, but for North Wales, we're going to Tywodvai in Penygroes, an amazing decarbonisation hub that's run through Adra and Bangor University, Coleg Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgomenai. It's an amazing place. I've been there before, and it you just think, wow, this is what we need more of across Wales, across Europe. It really is inspiring. So it's a little study visit, going around the place, and then we'll use their meeting room there over some lunch and have a good discussion. So that's next week if anybody is interested in it. It's on our website. We also want to mention we're lobbying Welsh Government with a number of other people around heat pump planning reforms. I don't know if it sounds like a boring thing, but it's so important to landlord costs, tenants, things like that. If you want to put a heat pump in England, there used to be a 1 meter rule. If it was more than 1 meter, you had to get planning permission. They've scrapped that now. Hey, we are still stuck with a 3 meter rule, and it's been going on for too long now. We've written to the First Minister, we've written in collaboration with about 6 or 7 other organisations. There is a consultation out now, but it hasn't closed yet. And with the Senate elections next year, it's really not clear when. And the problem is this is adding cost to landlords. It's delaying the benefit to tenants, private owners missing out on grant funding. My mate Gareth, who's 2 doors away, took him 10 months to get all the right planning permissions. He lives in a terrace like me. You know, a lot of us live in terrace streets. So again, we're pushing on that, and it's just too slow at the moment. And the other thing I was going to mention before we get started, look out for our socials. We make a lot of interesting, I hope, decarbonisation, net zero content. I think one of them there, we were in Betws in Newport last Thursday, I think it was Exeter, with Link Cymru, looking at their salt share scheme and things like that. Some wonderful things on it. So do look out on our socials. And I just want to go through quickly now this week. We've got themes for each day. We're looking at the bigger picture today. We're going to look at retrofit tomorrow. Wednesday, looking at affordability and how do you make this happen? You know, for how do we make it affordable for tenants, but also landlords can fund the work that needs to be done. And Thursday is about innovation. And I say Friday we'll look at Journey together. Really good week. Some great speakers over the week. I probably haven't got time now to go through all of it, but I would really encourage you to look at the programme and come to it. This afternoon. We're going to have some honest conversations about ORP, retrofit, new builds. What's working, what's not working in terms of the work that's been done to date and what's planned in terms of technologies, solutions. How do we make these things work? So I think this afternoon is going to be a real honest and positive session on where we are. And tomorrow we're going to be looking at retrofit, as I say, some great speakers there talking about what they've done to date. And in the afternoon, some people from across the borders in Scotland and England. Tanya Jennings, a personal professional hero of mine. I love what she's always an interesting speaker. Some great speakers there talking about where we're going and how it's working. And then Wednesday, this is important stuff where we look at how do we make this work. We've got some very, very influential speakers here who've got thoughts on how to get this funded, how to make this work for everybody so that everyone benefits. Really important session. And innovation. I think this is yours, isn't it? You wanted to bring some people together to show that there is some really cool stuff out there, some really good innovation. And you know, let's look at some of these things that are coming along in the pipeline that are quite cool, you know. So today's session, I'm just conscious of the time. Why is Wales striving to net zero? What is the journey ahead and where we're going? We've got some lined up 3 people. I'm hoping the minister's going to join us in a minute. Actually, it'll give me a nod when she arrives. But Jayne Bryant is the Cabinet Secretary. Sorry, I still say Minister every so often, my fault. Cabinet Secretary for Housing and Local Government since last July. Met her, had honest conversations with her a number of times about building safety, a number of things. She really wants to see some till the next elections inside of see through some really important legislation. Really wants to see the ground put in place for as we go forward with net zero. She is a Senate member since 2016 and has served in a number of roles as Minister of Mental Health in early years. And I'm hoping she's going to pop up in a second. And she hasn't yet. I'm going to introduce our other two speakers. I'm sure I'll end up doing it twice. But Sero Daly is our opening panel speaker. We really, on LinkedIn, she's a very forthright and open speaker, talking about the challenges of net zero and sustainable development. She's been in the sector 25 years. I hope I haven't got that wrong. Working across strategic level around decarbonisation at government level, industry, not profit. She led the neighbourhood services at Turner Townsend and advised government. I think she's also a TEDx speaker. There's all sorts of things here. I could probably carry on with her CV for all morning, but she's a very influential speaker. I was somebody who really wanted Sero to speak for this session because I think that it's not going to be an easy session. I think she's going to talk about what's working, what isn't, and some honest conversation about the challenges. We're living in challenging times at the moment. And our third speaker to round it up and bring it together is James Williamms, the co-founder. He is the chief exec of Sero. Again, I could read out James's profile. Actually, it's going to be. He's an engineer background, worked in renewable energy, co-founded Sero. How I describe James is somebody who just knows some serious stuff. I went recently to see him. I was stuck on something, and we sat down over a coffee at their office, and I was just like, "Whoa, I didn't know this." And just some of the knowledge he has just made me. And he does. James and Andy, his partner, the two co-founders, do get calls from TBAS every so often. Can you explain how this works? What exactly? And their knowledge is superb. All the whole team there. So that's our speakers for the morning. I'm going to come off in case I've missed anything, and hopefully the minister will pop up now. Am I off slideshow?
Yes,
No.
Dave.
I am I? So I've got so many screens open here that I can't see you in the full screen. Stop share.
I can see your screen. Yeah.
Right, sorry. Okay. Well, the minister isn't here.
We're still waiting for Jayne, Bryant, and MS to join.
I don't want to wait like this. Is there anything I've missed, Akshata, that I should have mentioned? And James and Sero, can I actually come back on the screen? Just help me out a bit here. So I'm familiar with
Of course.
no, right, okay. So I'm sure she'll be along in a minute. I'm not sure. I don't really want to start or swap it around or anything because the minister's cabinet secretary's on a very tight schedule. Got some things in the chat. Let's have a quick look. Oh, that's you actually to mention in the Padlets and stuff. As shared resources, that's good. Okay. Should we start some Q&A then, maybe, or something? Really? So anyone got any questions? Come on, somebody must want to ask us something. Put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A. No. So it's Monday morning, isn't it? You're all too no one's awake yet.
They're all being too shy. That's the problem, David.
First session, but it always is. It always is. By Thursday, the comments are down the page. So I know I might be interrupting your flow of what you're going to talk about, but we're used to ORP, which is the funding program for retrofit here. And James as well, you operate in England as well, don't you? What's the equivalent in England, and where is it in terms of, is it more advanced? Is it behind? I know we've had a number of, or is it different? Do they fund different things? Because we've had a lot of test and learn. I have my views on whether hydrogen is sustainable or not, but we've funded stuff in Wales to test hydrogen in the homes. Is there anything you see differently here?
So I definitely see it ramping up a bit more. I mean, I think Wales maybe had the head start. The innovative housing program, I
Yep.
guess originally was really leading for testing and trying some of this stuff. And then optimized retrofit program came along and,
Yep.
looking at the challenge of the existing homes. But now we have in England, most recently, what's being called Wave 3, which was the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund for the first couple of waves, but has now kind of matured and evolved to become the Warm Homes Social Housing Fund.
Okay.
So there's several, it's kind of similar in many ways. It's grant funding, issued by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero.
They've got a really snappy name, haven't they? Then
DESNZ,
Yeah.
as DESNZ as we call it. And yeah, it's designed to kind of hit. It's typically been aimed at hitting EPCC as a sort of interim target for social landlords in England. However, more recently they are looking, it's become more focused on things like heat pumps. So this most recent wave has really started to prioritize and really push things like heat pumps within that, because previous waves have maybe incentivized more fabric and energy efficiency measures. Now sort of renewables and heat pumps are becoming more important in this recent wave. So we've actually all been waiting for the wave to hit us after supporting many landlords to bid last November. So now we those were announced about 6-7 weeks ago.
Okay.
So social landlords in England are definitely gearing up to spend this most recent kind of wave.
Yeah. So Sero, if it was only going to EPCC, that feels like there wasn't much innovation in that. It feels a bit fabricy. Has there been many large-scale tests and interesting things happening?
Well, I think it's been a really interesting period of time, because if you think about it, the whole sector, the social housing sector, has had to evolve at enormous speed from pretty much just focusing on decent homes and the sort of basics of getting a house right, to actually understanding quite complex building physics for a huge number of different archetypes of properties. I think we're probably coming through the real sort of thrust of that in terms of what's happened in the market. Because again, if you look at what asset management teams have had to do in the transition they've had to go through, it has been pretty spectacular, really, over the last 3 or 4 years. So to a certain extent, I think innovation has taken a back seat. Maybe it shouldn't have, but I think just the ability to be able to understand stock, get the data right, and really be able to put together a workable plan for the worst performing properties has actually been probably challenge enough for the sector. What I'd really like to see happening, though, over the next few years is that nuance of really understanding, for example, whether or not a heat pump is going to perform in certain properties, whether it's air source or ground source, whether other types of electric heating can be brought forward, particularly in non-standard properties. I live in a top floor flat myself in a converted Regency building, and I've been trying for the last 2 or 3 years to get a heat pump or a low carbon source of heating installed, and I failed spectacularly. And I know a lot about the sector and a lot about everything that's involved in it, but there's a whole range of complexities there, whether you're an individual or whether you're part of an asset management team, in getting suppliers who are prepared to install technologies in different sorts of buildings. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens over the next year or two. Has Jayne made an appearance yet?
No, I'm being told she's about 20 minutes away. I don't know whether we can.
Okay.
I don't
You're going to switch the agenda then?
I think we're going to have to, yeah. But I don't want to start you, Sero, as our key speaker with then the minister arriving. So I'm going to maybe put James on the spot because I know he was meant to wrap up, which is probably going to throw all his things he was going to do, because I'm sure he was going to build on the minister and what Sarah's going to say. I don't know. I won't suggestions how we do this, but I've been told about 20 minutes away. So
20
we
minutes,
do
yes.
need. I don't know whether. Oh, Sarah,
I'm happy to stand in for the minister, David, if that's that's what you're asking me to do.
Yeah, you're always innovative, James. Yeah, Sero. So yeah, I'm really putting you on the spot here. Yeah,
because I guess maybe I was planning about 10 minutes, so I'm very happy. I'm very happy to go now, if you'd like, and but please, if just interrupt me if turns up any earlier than that. So
Sorry, but David,
shall I
but
get? Shall I?
has just joined the conversation.
Right.
Jayne
I didn't hear you.
has just joined our call.
Yes, right. Okay. Couple of secretary over there.
Right.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah. Not
So
sure
she's on mute and screen. Oh, thanks very much for everybody who's submitted some questions. We will definitely thank you for this. Thank you, Amanda, for kicking it off.
till we get Jayne, Bryant, and sort of set up the camera and stuff, do we go about with James? I don't know how to
No.
do it.
Let's see. Okay. I can't, the minister's, oh. Sorry about this. Don't know. The minister's in the room, but the camera is off and the mic is off. I'm guessing, I'm hoping somebody's trying to get there. Susanna Morgan saying thanks, really like the Padlet idea. Yeah, we'll put them on. There'll be a kind of obsessed with these Padlets, but we'll make a dedicated net zero week Padlet and we'll put links to the other ones on there as well as the slides and the videos and stuff. They have been really popular. I know the WHQS2 one has about 50, 60 items on there that we've collected up and it's been really popular. So yeah, we'll get that. Okay. James, you might need to fill it again. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Do you want to do some of the questions? Do you want to talk about some of the questions? Should we?
Okay, yeah. I mean, Sarah, if you're around as well, I guess one of the first ones is, what do tenants tell you are their main concerns regarding retrofit of their homes? And maybe actually you can join on this. You do a lot of listening to tenants as well. What are their main concerns about retrofitting and how can they be reassured?
So, I mean, maybe I'll kick off, shall I? And I guess one of the things I guess that we would hear is that there's is trusting that the technology is going to do the things that it says it's going to do, because I guess, for many of us, our source of information is the press or the media, which are quite often filled with lots of stories of things that don't work or poor experiences. So I think being able to create that trust and to show, and the work the TPAS does in this area is excellent, which is show this technology can be a real benefit. So I think there's that trust point, first and foremost, and then I guess secondly, it's how does it fit within their home, and does the cupboard have to go? What does it look like? How does it feel? How is it going to change the way I live in my home? And those are kind of quite often the sort of key things over here.
Okay. So, did you say anything different or to tenant concerns?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's perhaps been underestimated is that those who are often in the greatest need, who are in the poorest accommodation, are very often the most vulnerable people as well. And the communication process is actually quite different. So if you've got somebody who's got severe anxiety or very elderly and very, dependent on their routine, even the idea of work people coming in to be in their property for multiple days can be absolutely catastrophic for them. It can actually increase their feelings of I suppose anxiety and depression or whatever else. I've also heard anecdotally about mothers with very young babies who are again worried about the noise and the dust and the disruption. So whilst I know there's been a thought that it's always best to keep people in their own homes, I think sometimes there is a case to actually discuss whether or not that person would prefer to be decanted for a short period of time to somewhere hopefully close to where they already live, so they're not too far away, but so they're not within an area where there's going to be a lot of noise, disruption, interruption, and where they can't sort of find their own sort of peace and whatever. So I think if we would sort of take that sort of approach as well with certain tenants, that hopefully it would just increase or decrease the refusal rate, which is a real issue if you're dealing with blocks of properties in one go.
Just to follow up on that, I think Amanda's just put in there, would decanter make the work done quicker, or would it be about the same? I don't know if you've got any experience with that either, Sarah or James.
Well, technically it could be quicker because if you're not working around somebody, if you can go in, and also, I mean, it's something I've often banged on about, particularly back in my SHRA days when we were supporting landlords, is trying to get multiple things done at the same time, not going in and repeatedly visiting a tenant within short periods of time with other interventions that need to be done. So bundling stuff up, and if there are other things that are going to be needed within a short period of time, try and get them done together, which again I think is even more important if you're dealing with vulnerable tenants.
It's this old scaffold mentality, if you're going to do scaffolding, get a couple of things done at the same time, isn't it? Or we've heard stories, we'll probably hear in the retrofit session tomorrow, like gardens getting churned up, a lot of equipment. Well, just churn it up once type thing, Yeah, good. What else did we have on the Q&A here? Do we think that deadlines are achievable with the current funding, technology and staff? This has come up a few times, hasn't it?
So I guess this is a key one for us. So I'd say with the current funding, technology and trade staff, I'd say no, because we are at the moment wholly reliant on government funding, which will only get us maybe 10% of the way there. And the other problem that we've got is that if we're reliant on waves of government funding, if you think about all of whether it's the social landlord themselves or all of the supply chain, we're all kind of sat there waiting to hear what the next wave looks like. If we knew how we were going to fund our way to get to net zero or 2050, or any deadline before that, then we probably set ourselves up very differently. We could give supply chain confidence, we would train people, even businesses would respond to that. Landlords, I believe, would actually probably think about decarbonisation and very differently. It's just another form of planned maintenance in many ways. So I just think we would set ourselves up very differently if we had, more than a couple of years visibility of where the money's going to come from. And that's the same is true for both landlords and for business. I think a lot of people have been burnt by the fact that money can come and can go, and whether there's a new spending review and cuts to public budgets, it just is it going to be there? I think long term is the question.
Is it not just finance as well, though? We've had some flip-flops on whether EV vehicles were going to come or go, weren't there? There was a deadline for petrol, there was deadlines for EP, for WHQS or whatever the England version is called, Decent Home Standard. Things get extended, changed. PRS was one point had some not tough from my perspective, but the landlords say some tough objectives for PRS, and then they just suddenly went back and back. It's not just a finance, is it here, I think, Sarah, is it? It's a policy changes every so often, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when my colleagues who used to do a lot of support for social landlords applying for grants used to always say, the bottom line is treat grant as a Brucey bonus, not as the sort of the default. If you can't make your plans work without the funding, then there's probably a little bit of a weakness in your plans, because exactly as James said, you really need to start considering decarbonisation. Considering everything to do with asset management in a very holistic way. So if you think about, heating in the same way as you would think about other aspects, kitchens and bathrooms and roofs and doors and windows and whatever, if you're aggregating all of the things that need to be done in that property, and then you can draw down some funding if and when it's available, then you've got a really comprehensive long-term strategy. If you just move from one bid window to the next, you're never going to get any continuity within your plans, and that's it's really costly for organisations to bid. It takes them a huge amount of resource,
Yeah.
and it takes their eye off of the ball. So again, the idea is keep focused, integrate all of those requirements, have a long-term plan, working through the worst properties first, and hopefully then you will end up benefiting from grant rather than being grant dependent.
Yeah. And it's that part of keeping the supply chain informed, isn't it? I
Yeah.
come from an ad agency background, and there's nothing worse than bidding on pitches and things like that, and then the client just sort of goes quiet on you. You don't know where you stand. Is it happening? Is it delayed? We need that supply chain transparency as well as to where landlords are in their thinking. Are they looking for new finance, so that people can start planning behind that as well, I think. Right, I'm going to take a view that the minister's having some technical problems. And I'm going to ask Sarah, can I hand over to you? As I said, Sarah was my real choice. I really wanted her to open this session of the week because I think she's an amazing speaker. I've stalked her on LinkedIn many times, following her, and I think the work that she does and her thinking was, I think, the great opening for this session. So, Sarah, can I hand over to you? You might get interrupted, but we'll see where we go.
Yeah. That's absolutely fine. I will give way to the Cabinet Secretary if that's required. Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Akshita, as well. I'm absolutely delighted to join you all today. So for those of you who haven't been stalking me on LinkedIn, I've been a sustainability and built environment strategist for, actually, it's 26 years now. I had to put together a PowerPoint presentation and then decided this morning, I think presentations create a barrier. So I just want to look in your eyes virtually and speak to you from the heart and the head, really, on my thoughts on some of these things today. So hopefully it'll resonate. And as I say, if I do need to break off and do this in two parts, that's fine by me, and hopefully it will be by you as well. So really what I'm absolutely passionate about at the moment is, we all talk about the broken housing system, and particularly the broken social housing system. I've got a theory, and I'm going to sort of explain to you today what that theory is. It's based on a lot of experience over the last few years, not working within social landlords. I've never actually worked directly for one. I worked for Sustainable Homes, which was owned by Hasto Housing, a housing association. So I have obviously experience of being in the family of a housing association. There might be some assumptions I've made that some of you might think, well, no, they're not workable, or we don't agree with those. But really what I want to do is just fire up a conversation, really get the discussion going, and really get to understand where the sort of minutiae of things are going wrong, and what can be done by social landlords themselves, and where we need some policy levers. So I suppose the main principle of what I'm going to sort of throw at you now, however controversial it might sound, is I think we have to decouple social housing strategy from anything to do with national house builders. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think it's, as we've experienced through a lot of privatisation, the model for organisations who are commercially and shareholder driven is just completely different. And we've got ourselves tied into a real knot at the moment. I don't actually think most of the national house builders want to build social or affordable homes. They've just kind of been strong-armed into doing it, and Section 106 agreements have obviously become the main vehicle for that. But I think we're starting to see now that people are realising that actually that isn't the answer, and it isn't delivering the homes or the quantity or the quality or anything else that we're after. So I think what we've got to do is just be realistic, accept that national house builders aren't discounting homes to make them affordable. Effectively, they're down-speccing them, and I hate to say it, but cutting corners. We've all witnessed this, and passing on snagging, defects, and other liabilities to social landlords, because once that transaction has occurred, there's no right to reply in a way that you wouldn't see in any other sector. So it hasn't done anyone any favours. I don't think it's done the reputation of the national house builders any favours, and it certainly hasn't done the social landlords any favours.
Sorry, so I think the
Um,
minister's, I'm sorry, the cabinet secretary's just popped in. I wondered whether we could
Perfect.
just give, I know because she's probably on a very tight schedule, whether we
Absolutely,
could
no
just
problem at all.
hold you for a second. Sorry, I interrupted you there. Sorry. Yeah.
Uh, uh, Thank you, David, and apologies, Sarah, and apologies to everyone for being late into this. So thank you for being patient as well. So diolch yn fawr. Perhaps are you happy for me to start,
Please do.
David?
Yes, yeah, I did an introduction before, so people
Oh,
were
lovely.
ready for you. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to join you at this really unique event. I think it's fantastic that tenants can get together with the social housing professionals and their supply chain to discuss how we collectively deliver affordable, warm, lower climate impact and greater energy independence. So this Welsh Government remains committed to net zero, not only to reduce global emissions, but to also deliver cleaner air, healthier homes, more stable energy bills, and new job opportunities in the heart of our communities across Wales. It is tempting to feel the global challenge of climate change is too big to tackle, too far into the future, or that our efforts have little impact. But we are seeing the consequences of changing climate in Wales now. So we saw the misery of the floods caused last Christmas, a wet winter followed by an incredibly dry spring, which impact farm crops and gardens, and our wildlife is struggling to adapt. But by working together, we can have an impact. I've been inspired by the work that social landlords are taking to build the best quality housing and to improve existing homes to be safer, healthier, and more affordable to heat. You're finding innovative solutions to overcome challenges, and you are cooperating to share that good practice. And I would like to see even more of this open, collaborative approach to delivery across Wales. I know there are challenges to decarbonising our stock. We're in short supply of skills in many areas. We need to expand supply chains. Finance, I know, is tight. And you are delivering other key priorities, including tackling homelessness and developing more affordable homes. But my role is to set a clear direction, remove barriers and provide appropriate support to the sector. So our Welsh Housing Quality Standard provides a long-term framework for landlords to work within, with one part specifically focused on energy and environmental matters. The whole stock assessments and target energy pathways you're developing are now key steps, developing a deeper understanding of your housing stock and producing a strategic plan for improvement. So this year we have £200 million of funding available to the sector to improve homes, including a record £93 million through our optimised retrofit programme. I hope you will take advantage of this funding, blending it with your own to deliver your improvement programmes. Government funding cannot cover the entire cost of the transition, and I'm also keen to see you explore innovative funding models as part of the solution. Our further and higher education institutions are keen to support people to secure green jobs. Local collaborations such as those between ADRA, Bangor University and Group Llandrailo Menai are having a real impact, offering genuine opportunities for local people to stay within their communities and develop those careers and businesses. We're supporting the sector to share experiences and good practice through the Net Zero Carbon Hub, and the Wales Built Environment Dashboard contains details of local suppliers. Of course, we can't do any of this without the support of tenants. Our climate change surveys show that people in Wales care about the environment and think we should be tackling climate change. But they also want to understand what the options are, how different technologies work, and the impact any changes will have on their daily lives. The relationship between tenants and social landlords is incredibly important, ensuring that people can be involved in the decarbonisation of their home rather than feeling remote from it. It's reasonable for people to be wary of big changes, and misinformation can really fuel that anxiety and resistance. But the Welsh Housing Quality Standard places strong emphasis on engagement, which should start early and be meaningful throughout. I visited TPAS Cymru in November and talked to tenants about their experience of living in social housing. And what really struck me was the importance they placed on having a supportive landlord who would listen to their concerns. When landlords show tenants understanding and care, trust is established and conversations about complex subjects or new technologies are far easier. If you are a tenant and have an idea about how landlords can improve their engagement on climate action and their energy efficiency programs, please share your thoughts with us during this week. The conference has some great sessions covering a number of the challenges and opportunities I've described. How do we finance the transition? What role does innovation have? And what can we learn from programs in other parts of the UK? There should be something for everybody in these really varied sessions. TPAS Cymru are producing a summary briefing of the key points raised during the week, and I know my officials would be keen to see and reflect on that. So once again, thank you so much for your commitment to work together to decarbonise social homes. I hope you have an excellent net zero week, and diolch yn fawr. Look forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of your time. I think what you've mentioned there about things like Tigwardfai, the ability for people to learn new skills and stay in their community is really important. We're going there next week, taking tenants and people there. I know you've visited there as well. Yeah, and the trust. I think there's already got questions on the side, people talking about, how do we know what technology is the right solution and things like that. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'm conscious of your time. I don't know if you want to hang around or if you want to.
I think I'll be. I've got people looking at me at the door, but because we've got a glass door, so I can see them looking at me. But I really hope you have a great conference. I look for, officials will keep in touch about this, so I'll be able to follow up on it. But again, thank you for. Your
officials are contributing during the week as well.
Yes.
And I know there's a number of them in tomorrow's session and things. So thank you.
Enough feedback, but thank you to everybody. It's really important, and I look forward to hearing how it goes. But diolch yn fawr.
Thank you guys. Cheers. Diolch.
Take care.
Right, Sarah. Clearly, adding adaptable will need to be added to your profile and your CV.
Always flexible.
Always flexible. Thank you. I know I interrupted you. I apologise. I knew the minister was on a window and I was getting messages saying, "Come back to interrupt, Sarah." Sorry. Yeah.
No, absolutely no problem at all. Okay, so just to dive back in, so obviously I am talking predominantly at the moment about new build, and the reason I'm doing that is because we're still putting homes into the retrofit funnel, so it is all part of the same picture really, and we're also creating homes that aren't appropriate. So again, just to go back to that sort of theme really about the snagging and the defect liability that gets passed on. Landlords end up paying through the nose if there are latent defects. And, I was talking to one head of asset management at a social landlord recently who told me that 6 out of their 10 most serious properties, apartment blocks these are, that had latent defects, 6 out of 10 of them had been acquired in the last 10 years. So these are essentially brand new properties that are now going to cost them millions of pounds to rectify. Now that's a scandal. That money is actually being sucked into other budgets when it should be, either going into retrofit for genuine requirements or into building more new homes. And that's happening up and down the land, and how that can be allowed to happen, I don't know, but it is shocking, but typical. So, we've got to really start thinking about what that discount actually means and what affordable actually means, because the silos within social landlords mean that budgets are in different pots. So you've got the development team who are very much looking at getting the maximum number of units or homes for the budget available. Then you've got another pot of money that's being used to rectify, and then other pots of money that are used in asset management that again shouldn't really be used on new homes. There shouldn't be really any requirement for a lot of that cash to be allocated in those ways. So, the impact on tenants, and particularly tenants who've moved into a new home, in exactly the same way as somebody buying an open market home for themselves, you move in thinking this is going to be trouble-free, and you can imagine the impact on tenants if they move into a new build and then they've got the disruption, the hassle, and the stress of having to constantly report things that aren't working or need to be rectified. So, there are issues there. And I've also heard an asset management team talking about the increasing number of properties which are showing signs of damp and mould after just 2 years. So again, these are things that should not be happening, and it's a failure within the system. So, we could look at what should be done to actually make private house builders behave differently, or we could just go about this in a completely different way. My view is that any retained asset, whether it's for build to rent or for a social landlord, actually needs to be designed differently for robustness and for ease of asset management. So it's actually essentially a different product to a standard home in the standard way that we've been used to thinking about it. But we haven't been really verbalizing that, and I think this is one of the things that we need to start doing. So I think, this sort of democratization of public housing, if we start thinking about public housing in a very different way, and perhaps, more similarly to the way the Scandinavians and other European countries think about housing, it's a very different approach. So recognizing the false economy of buying at lowest cost per square metre is part of it as well. We need to really understand what value means. We need to understand what performance means and how you actually get the specification and the cost at the right appropriate level. So you can still have best value, but best value isn't lowest cost per square metre. And I think we've got into that trap. One little anecdote actually from my time when I was at Sustainable Homes, when I was speaking to the asset management team at our parent social landlord. Horrific story, they actually crunched the numbers and worked out that to replace a tap in one of their properties actually cost £800. So the tap itself might only cost £25, but if you actually look at all of the people and I suppose processes that are involved in getting that tap fitted, from somebody going out and looking, coming back, ordering it, the whole procurement process, receiving the product, going out and fitting it. The person might not be in the first time you go out, you might have to go out a second time. All of those things, they added up, and the average cost worked out at about £800. And another story I was told recently was a social landlord where they've been paying between £50,000 and £80,000 each time they've needed to knock together 2 semis to actually create a house big enough for larger families or multi-generational living. Now, again, huge waste of resource and money. Why aren't we specifying those buildings correctly in the first place? So I'll come on to that in a second about what that means from a specification point of view. But, we've got another really important point here with public land. So we know a lot of local authorities and other public organisations do have sites and do have availability of land that could be used for public good. I've written a couple of articles about this actually, which are in Social Housing magazine, and there's some stuff on LinkedIn as well if you look at my profile on that. So I won't go into a huge amount of detail, although I do in those articles about how it can actually work. But we should be thinking about, particularly with hard-pressed local authorities, many of whom are either on the verge of or have actually entered really significant Section 14 situations because they can't deal with their emergency and temporary accommodation costs. So if we actually look at public land, that's a really important area that we can actually start to understand how that land can be brought forward at zero capital cost and offset against those emergency and temporary costs. I think there's also an opportunity to look at a broader range of social rent options. So at the moment, we've got a model which very much works for the poorest and most vulnerable in society, and we need to carry on looking after people in those categories. But actually, many other countries actually have a much wider view of social rent, and you can cross-subsidise with higher earners to help to deal with some of the lower cost. Sorry, the people with the ability to pay lower rents. And that can have a huge number of benefits. It can give you much more balanced communities and neighbourhoods with more economic and social diversity, young professionals, key workers and others who can afford to pay an enhanced social rent, and that then goes into the pot, either again to contribute towards those new builds or to help with the retrofit programmes. So one of my real passions here is what I call needs-based assessment of housing requirements. So we know there are a lot of waiting lists and there's a lot of data within those waiting lists, but I'm not really sure if we're using that intelligently enough at the moment. We know that there's a huge range of different types of people living in properties, and the social housing is more disproportionately affected by people who've got complex needs. So again, if we look at things like multi-generational or larger families, supported living, so autism, disability, dementia, or other supported needs. Again, we've been told recently about a local authority who's been spending £5,000 per week per person with supported living needs. And that includes a care package, but we've actually come up with a formula where we can actually provide far better quality accommodation, far more appropriate to those individual people's needs, at half that cost. So, and again, with another model that we've been looking at with an investor who's looking at a leaseback opportunity for local authorities or housing associations, KPMG modelled the approach, and it was going to save that local authority £46 million over the next 10 years. So there are different ways, different mechanisms that can come in. It doesn't all have to be about finding immediate cash. If we've got land availability, let's bring it forward and let's look at more creative ways of finding money and bringing it into the system. So the needs-based side is really important though, because it isn't just about putting people in boxes on a chart. It's about understanding that those homes need to look different in certain circumstances. Sorry. So again, if we go back to multi-generational families or larger families, very often there isn't just one couple in that household, yet the standard 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom houses tend to have one double room for the parents and then a variety of sizes of rooms, assuming normally that there will be a descale in the size of the human who's going to occupy the room. Well, we know that's not always the case. There are lots of families where adult children are still living at home into their 30s. Well, they're not going to fit in the same size room as a 4-year-old. So the idea that bedroom number 3 can occupy, as I always say, my son was 6'4" at about 15 years of age. He wasn't going to fit in a single bed in a tiny bedroom. But even so, when we've got adults who are forced into living at home for longer periods of time, we really do need to make sure that space standards are cognizant of the person living there and what their requirements are. They need space for a wardrobe, a dressing table, potentially a workspace, and that doesn't fit into a standard single bedroom size. So what should those properties look like in terms of those specifications? We know refugees and asylum seekers from warmer countries need to, very much need to operate their homes at a warmer temperature than perhaps the average person in the UK might normally operate their home at. So again, making sure that we've got homes that can flex to different heating requirements. Again, elderly people or people with other health issues might need to operate at a higher level, but very often can't because of the specification of the home and its and the cost of actually heating it. We've also got people like care leavers and ex-military who can suffer horrendously from isolation. So again, how are we thinking about how we're accommodating people who are perhaps in a single household situation, but might need a different approach? So what sort of things can we do from a practical point of view then? Well, I think, we need much deeper affiliations and collaborations between local authorities and housing associations. There's, it's easily said, and I know in some areas there are incredibly strong relationships and there is really good collaboration, but in other areas it is dysfunctional, and local authorities might be imposing requirements onto RPs. I did hear of one recently where they said, the local authority said to them, we just need your properties and we need them available now. And they might have a family of 5 or 6 people going into a 1-bed flat because that was all the RP had available. This is not helpful, is it? It might get them out of B&B and it might help reduce a particular cost for the local authority, but it's not really a solution. So, let's think, beyond the knee-jerk reactions and the crisis thinking into those sort of medium to long-term solutions. We know that there's a lot of land that's available, so it might be constrained sites or garage sites or airspace above, parades of shops. There's all sorts of different areas that could be thought about. So existing buildings being reconfigured, but also where we can put new homes in. But if we have that needs analysis and we know exactly what sort of numbers of different types of properties we need, then we can overlay that with site availability and start making some really sensible decisions about what types of properties go where and what features and benefits they will offer the occupants. And that's something I really don't think is happening enough at the moment. If it is happening, brilliant, and I'd love to hear the case studies of that. But it's the principle behind this is that if we can take the land cost out, if we can then, and also take the developer cost out, effectively, by the old measures, that's almost 2/3 of the cost coming out, and then we can really focus on getting the quality and performance and sustainability of the homes that we are actually delivering to the right level. That's what people like Agile, who I work for, are doing, and I know there are others doing this as well. We're absolutely focused on, not making our, huge tranches of profit out of development, but really making sure we're delivering high quality, affordable homes. But we also need to create specifications for universal use. So again, we feel the standard template that's become normalised in housing is just not cutting it for the majority of people. And that leads again to difficulty for tenants and also higher asset management costs in the long run. So let's look at those. Again, I could speak for an hour on that, but I won't. So come back to me if you want to know more about how we can do that. But making sure that we're not modifying properties after the event is massively important to make sure we've got the money. So again, going back to cost per square metre, if you're paying lowest cost per square metre and then you're throwing another 30% at that from a different pot in order then to make those houses more appropriate, and then throwing more money at it in 5 or 10 years' time to retrofit the property to make sure that it's carbon neutral. This is all money that it costs more and more. The more times you touch a property, the more it costs. So let's just try and get things right in the first place. Homes can actually be built to Future Homes Plus standard, so super insulated with MVHR, triple glazing, all of those sort of features. We can make sure that these homes are super low cost to run in the winter and no overheating risk in the summer. So we're building in resilience from the outset. And most importantly, clean indoor air quality. It's so undervalued, the importance of air quality. I noticed in the chat somebody had mentioned earlier about somebody with breathing difficulties. That isn't just in situations like, retrofit work being done on the properties. Some people suffer from really extreme breathing difficulties just in normal life because they haven't got the right filtration systems in their home. And that can actually lead to, chronic illness and worklessness where it needn't be an issue. So let's start thinking about those sort of issues too. And also got lots of information I've been working on the CapEx v OpEx evaluations. So if you've got teams who are struggling to understand how to present those business cases back to your board, let's get those conversations moving. It's actually not that hard to do once you just know which elements to include in your calculations. But we really have to move away, move to better homes and away from business as usual. If sufficient sites aren't available from public land in your particular area, then there are other solutions at the moment. So I think I mentioned, potential for lease models. There's patient capital. There's lots of weirdly international investors who look to the UK market who still want social value, but actually see the UK as a well-regulated, well-functioning housing kind of market, I suppose. We might know from the inside that it's not quite as perfect as it could be, but compared to other countries, there are lots of things which make it very investable. So there are opportunities there. And again, if anybody wants to know about how some of those work in terms of lease back or lease purchase options for new builds, then I'd be very happy to speak to you. We also need to tie into net zero neighbourhoods. There's obviously a huge amount of work going on in that space at the moment. So integrating new builds and existing builds, really understanding what needs to be done with biodiversity and creating good green space and land around those properties is crucially important as well. And another area I'm massively passionate about is the skills and jobs agenda that Jayne Bryant also mentioned. We should be really maximising on the opportunities for long-term, high-quality local jobs whenever there's any of these construction projects coming through, whether it's retrofit or new build. That's how we get deep social impact. That's how we get that tie-in between the three pillars of economic, social, and environmental benefit into our communities. But too often it's an afterthought, or somebody might just put in a token apprenticeship or something just to make it look like there's something positive happening in the community. We can do far better than that. We should have flying and pop-up factories in communities where we've got some of this work being undertaken, where we've got MMC, panelised systems that can be brought forward at speed. We should be building and delivering homes in weeks, not months. And we should really be making sure that underrepresented groups are being brought into models where we can employ NEET, small women, people from other diverse groups. Agile are also working very closely at the moment on the Prisoners Building Homes programme. So we've got prisoners actually in prison within workshops, but also within our own facilities where prisoners under licence are actually able to get that all important rehabilitation skill, get some dignity, get some ability to do something that's actually going to make sure that they don't reoffend. These are the sorts of things we talk about all the time. It's absolutely open to work with all sorts of community groups, the RP's community teams, organisations like Groundwork, and work alongside retrofit schemes. We really can pull all of these wonderful things together. So in summary, I'm not quite sure where I've gone on time now. Most social housing is not the same as standard market housing. It needs to be specified differently. We need to think differently about it from the outset, and we need to deliver it differently. Public land should be utilised for public good, and we need to make sure that we're not getting into this trap of spiralling emergency and temporary accommodation costs being, what's driving the sector. We need to think strategically about all sites that might be available and the vital role of good housing in a well-functioning society, and make sure we get all of those dots joined up and remove the barriers that are creating the slowness in bringing those forward. We need to pivot at speed to needs-led design, so really understand exactly what configurations we need for different occupant groups. and make sure that we're not wasting money by ripping out perfectly good kitchens and bathrooms and bedrooms and knocking buildings together unnecessarily when we could actually build them correctly in the first place. And the same with supported living needs, making sure that those homes are specified so that they work immediately for the occupants. We need to make sure that the specification meets the needs, the health and well-being of occupants. The Future Generations Act is there to guide us, and we've got all the answers, but we're not always terribly good at putting them together. And make sure that we've got ease of asset management for retained stock, again, hardwired into the whole model. We need better connection between development, asset management and tenant engagement teams so that we get the design and the functionality right and we can design out waste. And we need to start working more with different configurations of organisations. So again, Agile are very much in that mould of not being a developer, but being able to do the design and build all the way through and making sure that high performance is actually built in. But if we've got no land cost, no developer cost and exact specification and configuration, we have got genuinely affordable homes. We just need to think about what that means from a cost and value perspective. I have it's very much at the early stages, but I've put together a website called greatbritishhomes.org. It's my personal mission really to drive policy towards how we sort of flip the way we think about social homes delivery and really start to get that joined up thinking between skills, public land for public good, reducing local authority costs and improving lifetime outcomes for individuals in those homes. So that's basically where I'm coming from, everybody, and I'm looking forward to a very feisty debate about whether or not we can do this and deliver it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks very much. And it's prompted a number of questions on the side and in the Q&A. So yeah, thank you so much for that. I think there's a number of things you talked there that really got me thinking about. Design standards has come up a lot. The housing supply and the land stock. We're really keen to do an event soon on abandoned buildings and just why we're ripping down certain buildings and developing and stuff. We're just looking for a sponsor at the moment, but we're keen to have that debate on housing supply. I think is really important, and what we're building, what types of properties are we building. Thank you for that. That's great. Sorry, James, I don't know if you're still around. Yes, you are. Thank you. As with Sarah, I've jumped you around. Both of you are been very professional and bearing with me today in this session. So, James, is there anything you want to just bring together in terms of what you're seeing from your perspective in this big debate about where we go forward? Yeah.
Sure. So, just first of all, I'd just like to say thanks. We're delighted to be supporting TPAS Net Zero Week. Again, I think it's really important to us because the resident experience is just the number one priority for Sero, and it's really the thing that we have to get right in order to get any of this right. But we have to remember that before it's anything else, it's somebody's home. Just a little bit, just maybe quickly, just what we do. I mean, we, as you point out in your introduction in the beginning, David, so we work with social landlords through the whole journey from understanding and planning how they're going to upgrade their housing stock all the way through to them supporting the installation around quality and then actually going on to support long into the future is really where we see the need to stand behind the promises that you can make in the beginning and make sure that you actually deliver that by providing that service long term to the home. So we do work with the residents and not just during the installation phase. Today we support thousands of homes across England and Wales to make sure that the quality and the delivery is in line with the standards, the standard for retrofit, which is PAS 2035. But we describe ourselves as an energy services company, and on Wednesday I'll talk a little bit about what the difference between the world of energy supply, which is where we are today, to energy services, which is really where we believe we need to go, which is much more focused around outcomes rather than inputs. And actually, I just wanted to talk for a minute about a little bit around that point, just why why Sero started and what problem we were really looking to solve there. We do see homes as playing this really key role in the energy system. We're no longer at the end of the line, with big power stations and power, transmission running across the country with homes just, the industry calls us end users. We're not just end users of power anymore. We're kind of key players. If you think to the future, a home will be able to decide what it wants to do. It might choose to buy, it might choose to sell, it might choose to store for later. And all of these things will bring a kind of financial benefit to that home. So how do we get to this kind of future world where we're more of a key player in the energy system rather than a kind of always at the end? So and one of the things that from an energy system perspective, we think about homes is because it's somewhere we can feel the impact much more quickly. And just to give you an example, I mean, I'm not saying we don't need new power stations, but if we just take the big Hinkley nuclear power station for a moment, that's estimated to cost 46 billion. It's not going to be done until the 2030s. Now, they told us we'd be cooking turkeys at Christmas in 2017 on nuclear power, which is, kind of everything keeps moving backwards. And just for context, we could have halved bills for 1.5 million households with that money. So, and we would be a long way through those that too. So we don't have to wait till the thing is done. We can start having an impact in an individual home from day one. But we see the energy system as broken, completely broken. Now, 98% of the time, the amount we pay for electricity is actually linked to gas prices, which are linked to global politics and major events happening around the globe. And the last few years, we've seen how vulnerable we are to what's going on in the world, and we feel that then every day in our bills. So whilst we might talk about climate change, and it was kind of encouraging to hear from the cabinet secretary words like warmth, affordability, comfort, because I do think the narrative is moving to some of these things. So climate change is absolutely important, but actually this journey, I believe we'd go on it whether we had a net zero target or not, because it's about affordability, predictability. If you're some of the energy that comes off your rooftop, you are no longer exposed to a war in Ukraine or whatever was going on in the United States. So energy security, better experiences, health and well-being, these are the reasons for going on this journey and on this transformation. In many ways, the carbon saved is the cherry on top. And actually, when Sero first started, we used to say it's about carbon, cost, and comfort. And actually, what I would say today, it's about cost, comfort, and carbon. The order in which you put those three words are kind of really important as to what we're prioritizing today. So just to talk a little bit of what we've done, and I know you were keen for us to talk about maybe how Sero has evolved. I mean, in 2017, early 2018, there were no government grant funded programs. It was just about housing quality. It was very strange to talk about net zero and talk about upgrading homes or retrofit or any of those things. So clearly the last sort of 7 or 8 years, a lot has changed. We kind of looked at the whole problem, which is how do you have you still got me? Because I've paused on my
We
screen.
can hear you, but yes, you've frozen on the screen, but we can hear you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I'm back.
Back again, yeah.
Good. So we were looking at the whole problem. There are lots of challenges everywhere when you look. You can hear just from the discussion today, there are so many things that we need to do, from better data to financing to technology to how we engage residents through the journey. There are kind of problems and barriers almost everywhere in this journey. So we kind of, when we started, we kind of looked at that whole journey and thought, well, how do we get this sector moving, and where can we move things forward? We were very fortunate to work under the Innovative Housing Programme for the first few years. We've got some of the largest demonstration of new homes with heat pumps and batteries and solar panels and electric vehicle charging. And actually what we've proven in all of those homes is that that's considerable bill savings. The technology works, and it can be easier to live with. It has to go in properly, it has to be designed properly. There needs to be standards around both how it's designed and installed and operated as well, because that's one of the biggest mistakes that are made in our view, which is we kind of put technology in and then don't think around, well, it kind of needs to be operated in a different way. And also to make that operation very simple needs us to build different services and experiences and ways you might live or control or ask for the things that you want to get from the warmth of your home. So we've had a great opportunity to test there. Clearly, the biggest challenge is how we upgrade the existing stock. So through actually some Welsh European funding money, we actually looked at Penderry in Swansea, which is where we've upgraded 521 homes with solar and storage. Now, part of that project was looking at how you can equalize the benefits, because renewable energy can be very unfair as well. So what we don't want to introduce is another form of postcode lottery here. Firstly, who gets the grant funded home? Because if we're only going to grant fund 10% of homes, who's lucky enough to get that one? And secondly, who's lucky enough to be in the south facing home? What happens if your home is not viable for solar? So we're really driven by the right outcome brings bills down for everybody, and kind of consistently, which is, and Sero described social housing as a different product. I'd actually kind of add to that, the way we think about energy in social housing should be very different as well. And even, conversations that we have with the regulator, they just see homes as domestic energy users, whereas, if you're a resident in social housing, you can't choose to upgrade your home in any way. You kind of get what you're given, or you might be part of the program, you might not. So the relationship between landlord and resident is really important here. And actually, landlords are need to be more and more accountable for the energy and how energy is provided to their homes. If you think about it, it's kind of crazy that we let, let's just say you've got 10,000 homes, you're saying to 10,000 people, you go and navigate the energy system on your own, even though we're responsible for putting, for making sure that it's efficient and warm and comfortable. Now, just to, we've tried a lot of things, just to pick up on, we did a lot through grant funding. The Sero as a business has tried in many cases things that no one else has tried before. Now the reason we do that is so that we can learn. We've got some things that have gone fantastically well. There are other things that we've had to learn from, but we keep kind of pursuing the same mission as we did on day one. But what we have an opportunity to do is learn from those lessons and continue to evolve and continue to change and really provide better experiences. And actually, we measure ourselves by the number of homes we can reach. So we're consistently looking, how do we do more of this? How do we reach more homes? How do we reach more people? And how do we better increase the benefit to every household? So just to finish off, where do we go? Where do we go from here? So as I've said a couple of times, there is not enough grant funding to go around, and actually the kind of the distribution of benefit. There's some great examples where bills it can go as low as zero, and we've seen in the headlines, bills can be zero if you've got the right technology. But for the other 90% of homes that currently aren't on a list to get grant funding, or prioritize within the next couple of years, how do we reach those homes as well? So there needs to be more and more investment into retrofit of social housing, and there are lots of funders and pension funds and organizations that care about environmental and social benefits, that can take a long-term view and actually already invest in things like renewable energy projects. Now, putting renewable energy into homes is a kind of even more kind of meaningful investment because of the social benefits that can be created as well. So we're looking at these projects now across the UK. So we have thousands of homes going forward in Wales and England at the moment. And just as a rule of thumb, we can triple the amount of homes that landlords can reach with the funding that they've got, and we can reduce bills by on average around 20%. So those are meaningful impacts that can be created today. And then maybe just finally thinking about innovation around heat. And I do believe that when we start thinking about technology in the home, we'll start thinking about, clearly damp and mold has come up the agenda. And actually what we're seeing today is a response to that. No, we need more monitoring and we need to identify it more quickly. But our view is we need to eradicate it at source. We fundamentally believe that we spend more money fixing the problem. So whether that's fixing the building, whether that's the £1 billion spent in the NHS due to cold homes, whether that's having to be able to can residents and because the home isn't safe enough, or go and remediate it, we should just keep the people warm in the first place. So real innovation around warm rents. How does the landlord provide a basic level of comfort and heating? And those service models, we believe, will be the future. And renewable technology really paves the way for some of those exciting new opportunities. So look, I'm delighted to have a chance to kind of talk to you all. I'm looking forward to good discussions going out throughout the week on these topics and new learning. So just wish you all the best, and thanks so much for having us along for the journey again. So
thank you, James. Thank you very much. And I think there's a number of things there you talk about. The energy one is something that we're going to do more of, because I was at a site last week, a block of flats. The work's been done, the fabric, the solar, their energy bills are quite low, but there was huge more savings if the residents used the same energy supplier in their model. Now, that's a right of a tenant to use whichever energy supplier they want. But actually, everyone could benefit quite significantly if they had the same energy supplier. And that's an interesting dynamic, because we want to keep individual. I've got to stand up and defend individual tenant rights. But there's also, we all could have lower bills. And so I think there's some interesting discussions going forward on energy export, things like that. But maybe actually we need to look at our calendar and see where we can get some more in on that. Good.
Can I add a quick
point to that? Sarah. Yeah.
So back in 2017, actually, I had a conversation with Octopus about whether or not it'd be possible for them to create a white label solution for social landlords where solar could be put on any available roofs. So again, democratization of access to clean energy, not just the postcode lottery that James spoke about. They had been involved with a model with London and got their fingers burnt a bit, so they didn't seem terribly keen at the time. But we did work through some quite interesting discussions on that. And I think whether it's Octopus or anybody else, there will be energy companies out there who, again, it's about, you can't expect these people to be to path through our door. We've got to create the right environment for the commercial transaction to take place. So discussions need to happen. And I'm sure it's the sort of thing that James and Sero are looking at. But the idea of all of those assets that are out there that are just screaming out to be utilised, and then if you white label it and the clients are buying then from effectively an energy company that belongs to the social landlord, social landlords might think we're not energy companies, we don't want to do that. Or they might think actually this is a really good way of us delivering better value back for tenants and potentially ring fencing some funding that can be used again towards retrofit. So there's lots of different ways we need to think about things.
Yeah, no, I think it's more than just social housing. I think anyone's had the misfortune to listen to me on talk about net zero. I use a slide from Cardiff down. I'm looking out the window at the school now. School, massive PV, not doing anything on weekends. I asked them where the exports going. They have no idea. Right next to them, a block of social housing, and you're like, "Oh, come on!"
Yeah,
These people are paying 34p a minute. You're you don't even know where your solar's going, your exports. There's got to be ways.
Yeah.
But and I think that's why it's more than just the homes. It's the cost of the home to live in, the bills that go with it, not just the rent. It's good. I'm just conscious of the time. I think it's fascinating that actually everyone stayed with us, even though we're 15 minutes over. So I think that says a lot about this morning's session. There is anonymous 1021 has said, still don't know about the technology proposed. We're hearing there's research being done, and is there anything actually proving what's worth it and what isn't? I think it's an interesting subject because there's lots of testing going on, lots of tracking, but it's always a little bit in an inner circle of people, in the sector, asset directors and things like that. And I think there's something about tenants not necessarily seeing the transparency and seeing what's worked and what hasn't. I don't know if there's anything, Sarah, James, you've seen on this. I know we've got the Welsh Carbon Hub as well, haven't we? Is that what it's called, actually?
Yeah, I mean, it's fairly strong views on this one, David. So, I don't. The technology is unfamiliar, but not new. We clearly, as I said earlier, it needs to be designed, installed, and operated correctly. That goes without saying. But it's been proven when in all of those instances to work. And when we say what are the technologies, we are almost certainly talking about the getting the building fabric to a reasonable level, potentially not going highly disruptive or high risk, high cost, high risk works, reasonable level, and then electrification of heat, and as much generation as you can fit on, because it's almost certainly the route forward. Now, politically, we might not be that, but if you look at what are the technologies that government is trying to drive, it's heat pumps, it's electrification of heat. We know that we can save, we can prove that we can save on bills with those technologies. So it won't be the same everywhere, and there will be a mixture of different technologies. But on the whole, that's the reality.
Yeah. So, Sarah, you want to add on that, or
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, in terms of the data and learning, I don't think it's happened yet, but it surely must, that all of the past 2035 data that's being logged with Trustmark, there's got to be a way of interrogating that data in some sort of longitudinal performance study so that we get a bit more feedback on, and being able to again match different archetypes with different solutions and really learn from that data. I totally accept what James is saying, there, although I think I'm slightly hesitant about thinking all roads lead to a heat pump because, my personal experience and many others that I know, it hasn't been easy, not because a heat pump couldn't work, but just because suppliers just aren't interested in working with certain types of properties. So I think in the short term, there does need to be a bit more nuance in solutions, but I think you're absolutely right. There's like an inner circle of people who've got an understanding of certain technologies, but it's not necessarily being shared with the right people. And the grant funding is directing people towards certain solutions rather than looking at what those individual properties or users might need.
Yeah, okay, that's good. There's a comment on the side here, and it's about batteries and do we need to look at the safety implications of batteries. I'm going to pick this up first, and I should be passing it on, because to me, what we have to differentiate between is home storage batteries and your e-cigarettes, your cheap e-bikes, really cheap cables that my son seems to buy in Home Bargains, and sorry, no reflection on Home Bargains, but cheap electrics that have battery storage in them, cheap cables and stuff. I think that's very different to home storage, and it might be we need to do something on that in terms of maybe slightly bust some myths on it, because I don't see, and I sit on fire safety committees as part of TPAS's role, and I'm not seeing there being an issue with home batteries. I don't know, James, so if you agree, I think Alvid's put something in the side as well.
I was going to say Alvid's very helpfully posted the standard, which is what I was going to say. I mean, I think, I'm going to just take a step back just for 1 second, which is we need to be able to store energy, and there's not that many ways to do that unless you're next to big mountain that you can pump water up, or so storing energy, it has to happen somewhere. So if it doesn't happen in the home, it happens on the grid. So batteries are in the mix wherever they are. The question is the home the right place to put them, or maybe local to the home? And the way that we buy energy and metering, the financial benefit, the home is the best place to put it, because of the way we're set up today. It's not to say that if we didn't change the way that energy was bought and sold and regulated, that we wouldn't move it to community level or substation or wherever it might be. But today, financially, it's the best place to put it. Now, as the there are, like everything, there are batteries that are safe and been through robust testing, manufacturing processes of different chemistries, that they aren't all the same, and there are clearly technologies that are designed and dedicated for home use, that are very safe. But still, there's standards emerging now, so we can understand the best places to locate and install them.
Excellent. Yeah. No, I agree. It's and I think maybe we'll pick this up as a subject later this year, maybe run something on this, because it's not the first time it's come up. Sarah, I noticed you there was a question that came from response to what you were talking about. Decent sized gardens as well can assist with biodiversity, flooding issues as well. Is that something you've seen in your work in your consultancy and things like that? Do we need to consider green space and biodiversity more? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas that's a bit of an afterthought in development. So I don't think we're thinking well enough about the properties and how they're configured, and we're certainly not thinking well enough about the green space around them. Again, huge subject, and I could bang on for ages about this, not just from a biodiversity point of view, but also the social and neighbourhood impact of green spaces and communal spaces as well as private gardens. I think that setting standards is really important, and again, it's not helped by developers who sort of deliver a sort of square scrap of land that's fenced and then call that a garden. Not everyone has the ability to visualize what a garden could look like and how it could perform. But if I could just give one example, I think the disconnect for developers between the functions they have to go through in order to get planning consent, and then not bringing forward those benefits to make sure that occupants really understand, if there are any hedgerows or trees or what, the bat boxes, all of those sorts of things, all of the sort of richness of habitats in their area are just completely ignored once those developments are brought forward. I mean, obviously they've got an obligation to maintain things over a period of time, but it's never part of the story that people are told about new development. And I'd love to see that happening, because people have a genuine interest. You only have to see the numbers that watch David Attenborough programs. Ordinary people love anything to do with nature and biodiversity. It's just often packaged up in a very inaccessible way when we're talking about development. So let's sort of bring that forward. Let's make people really proud of their green spaces, and let's really help them to embed biodiversity into their environments.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, no, I think that's something that we strongly feel as well. Yeah, I agree. Right. I'm conscious of time just because we've gone over by quite a bit, but I think it's interesting that people have stayed with us and we're getting more and more questions. I want to say two things really. Firstly, thanks to Sarah, thanks to James, and to Jayne, the Cabinet Secretary. Really great speakers. I think we've started something here, a great opening session for the week. Lots of questions. If we haven't covered any now, we'll answer them. We're also going to take extracts from all the questions and things this week and put together a document about what was discussed, what were the questions, what were the concerns. So thank you both, Sarah and James. Thank you for helping and making this first session a success. I really appreciate it. I also want to say this afternoon, I've got to plug this afternoon because we want to talk openly about ORP, just generally what's worked so far, and new builds and things like that. Actually, just put together some great speakers for that, people who speak their mind. So please consider coming this afternoon. Actually, what time is it? 2 o'clock?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. Yeah, it's the same link all week. If you got into this session, you literally click it again and you can get into any session this week. We've designed it like that so you're not looking for different registrations each time. So look out for that session this afternoon. Darren Hatton as well. We're going to talk from Welsh Government perspective. Robert Nash from Urban Robotics and Alex. I think it's going to be an interesting session this afternoon. So stick with us this week, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Just 2 speakers, and to Jayne Bryant, Cabinet Secretary, thank you for making it such a great first session. I can see people putting excellent comments. Thanks to all. It's the first thing that's just come up on my screen. So thank you all, and thank you everybody who's made contributions and questions and made this work. We'll make sure we get through them all this week. Thank you. I'm going to close this session in seconds.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you both.
And, I hope to see you this afternoon. Some lovely comments here. Oh yeah, and Sarah's details are there. We'll put them in the Padlet if that's okay with you. And
Yeah.
we'll, because that's where we'll put everyone in the week to the resources.
There's a typo. I've just realised I did Sero, Daly, not .Daly.
Yep, we'll make sure that's
yeah.
We'll make sure that's right in the Padlet. And yes, thank you, Sarah, for your contribution. And
no problem.
I hope to speak to you soon. I'll be stalking you next year.
You're always welcome.
Thank you. And James,
Thank
you know,
you.
well, I'm always asking you questions. It's what we do. GPath, sometimes if I really need to understand how SEGS works, you're my person, I'm afraid.
Always happy to talk to you about energy, David. You know that.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Good luck for the rest of the sessions.
Cheers. Thank you. I'm going to close the session now, and I'll see you soon this afternoon. Cheers, both.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.